Today we have Vishnu from Ente here to talk about Ente, or not Ente, Ente, which is a
Right.
big misconception that you cleared up with me before our interview, which is really good. Do you want to start by just telling me a little bit about yourself and who you are?
So, hi, I'm Vishnu. I'm the founder and CEO of Ente. I'm basically a programmer. I've been building stuff for quite some time. And currently, I'm building Ente. And Ente is an end-to-end encrypted alternative to Google Photos. And Ente is also an alternative to Apple Photos that's accessible on all platforms. And unlike both Apple and Google, Ente is fully open source. So you can run Ente on your own servers if you wish. And the idea behind Ente is to make privacy accessible to your photos and videos because they contain an incredible amount of information about who we are and who we hang out with and what keeps us ticking. So the idea is to deliver a really beautiful experience of photos while preserving your privacy. And this in general requires a crazy amount of engineering and that's what I think we're good at and that's what we're here for, which is to deliver a high quality photos app that makes privacy easy. And yeah, so that's me. That's what we're doing at Ente.
Yeah, so I guess your history with Google Photos and Apple Photos, do you have any history with those platforms before you started Ente?
Yeah, so I used to be a hardcore Google Photos fanboy for quite some time, and so in general I'm very sentimental about my photos. I grew up around my dad clicking a lot of photos, you can having photos all around the house, and when Google Photos came is when I started appreciating photos a lot more because it made rediscovery really easy. They would kind of push you really nice notifications and uh, get you to actually go back in time and look at memories. And then what happened was I ended up working at Google as an engineer at some point, which is when I realized that, dude, like there's a lot of information about my photos which these guys can now see. And for someone like me who's very sentimentally attached, this was kind of a wake up call. So I did the next best thing. So I kind of bought an iPhone and I moved all of my data to iCloud, only to realize that Apple comes with its own baggage of ecosystem lock-ins. So my wife was on an Android device and she could no longer access my library. And that kind of broke the entire sharing workflow that we had set up. And at that point, I had a ThinkPad and I used Linux and I couldn't see my own photos on my laptop, which was like ridiculous for me. So and then I did the next best thing. So I actually set up Dropbox. I moved all of our photos to it because it's Dropbox is cross-platform. And the only problem with Dropbox is that it's not really the interface is not really built for photos. It's a very drive-like experience. While I was really used to the delight that Google Photos would provide, so and yeah, Dropbox really does not care about consumers, right? It's an enterprise business, so the UX did not make sense for me. And yeah, then to my surprise, I found out there is no other service out there which is making a product which is fully focused on photos and kind of handles your privacy really well. So I just started building something as a project, which has since then evolved into like Ente.
Got it. That's really cool. It's I didn't know the history that you had with Google and actually being able to see behind the scenes with that. Was it a common concern with any people around you at Google, or was it something that they didn't seem to really care about?
So interestingly, most Google folks would use iPhones. That's one bit of information, and I think a lot of this is normalized there, right? I think so. I mean, to give Google credit where credit is due, they're incredibly transparent as a company, right? They don't try to tell you something then do something else. They're very clear that they're an advertising company and that they derive information from all of your data. So even internally, it's not frowned upon because they don't think they're lying to users, and which is true. They're not. They're very honest about what they're doing. So yeah, there is no internal negativity as such. Although there was one, I think while I was working there, there's this whole Project Maven that Google was a part of, wherein they kind of given models to Pentagon for I think some drone attacks somewhere. So that really ticked people off, at least internally. And then Google finally had to backtrack. And I think currently Palantir has picked up the project since then. So I mean the project is going on, but at least Google is not actively contributing to it.
Got it. So, kind of pivoting over to Ente Photos, then, once you finally got this kicking off the ground, after trying out all these different photo alternatives, did you start this by yourself? What was kind of the moment for you where you're like, okay, I'm going to start this project? Did you start it by yourself? Is it still a solo project? Who kind of helps develop Ente Photos?
Right. So I did start by myself because see mostly I quit Google and came back for my own mental health reasons because there was nothing much to do there for me because Google is a really big company and for someone like me I derive a lot of joy out of work and it's the little work that is there at Google to do is also hidden behind a lot of bureaucracy, so it's incredibly difficult to get anything impactful done. So I came back home, this is in 2020, and I needed a photos app at that point, so I just started building this myself. And I think over a year and a half later is when Neeraj joined. Neeraj is our co-founder and CTO, because he was expecting a kid, and at which point he also realized that, hey, dude, like now that I'm gonna click a lot of photos, I do care about who's gonna get to see it, and I don't want anybody to see it. So, and Neeraj joining was like I think the best thing that happened to Ente at that point. And interestingly, so when I started off Ente, it was not really what it is right now. It is actually a hardware device which you could keep at home, and it was like a piece of self-hosted software that you could run. And then a couple of months down the lane, when I started picking people on Reddit and asking them that, guys, do you want to buy this piece of hardware that I'm building? And Reddit is in itself a very toxic place, so people are really mean, and I realized that nobody really wants to buy hardware from a non-established company. And I had gotten really attached to the product by that point, and I felt that if there is a way I can kind of make my living out of this, that'd be great. And so then I pivoted to a cloud offering, like a SaaS service. But for me, the whole idea behind this was that I did not want access to anybody's photos. So then I had to just attach a layer of end-to-end encryption between all of this. And yeah, so then yeah, I think this happening early 2021. Then Neeraj joined, and we launched in 2021. And yeah, since then it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, and then I guess what was the pivotal moment? Because the earlier things you were talking about sound a lot more enterprise focused. And now I would say that a lot of what you're doing is more geared towards just your average end user who wants to keep their photos safer. So at what point did you kind of shift into a different demographic?
So it was actually the same demographic the whole time. So I wanted something to keep my photos safe. And I think I had made the assumption that people will be open to buying hardware or like self-hosting stuff. And then I realized that the other problem with self-hosting is that what happens when I'm not around, right? Like who's gonna take care of the photos? And with photos especially, that's a very important question, right? The whole reason I click photos is so that my kid can see them at some point, like when I'm not around. And the last thing I want in their head when I'm not around is like, dude, who's gonna administer the system, and like who's gonna get the data out, and how will this continue? So the whole time the idea was to build something which my mom could use. It's just that I've had to learn along the way and have conversations with customers along the way to understand how to actually deliver that experience that I wanted to deliver.
Right. And then you, I guess, kind of have found a nice middle ground because having an end-to-end encrypted slash zero knowledge service is not the same as actually hosting your own data from home. But you did say you could self-host Ente.
Yes.
And is that compatible with like the average NAS that a person would have at home? Like, is that through Docker?
Yeah,
How do
it's
you host that?
a single Docker container, so it's actually our same production instance. So the code that we open sourced is our like live breathing code that's actually running on our own production service. So we have a single Docker command to get it up and running across our instances. You can run the same command, and we have a decent amount of documentation as well. And in general, there are a lot of folks in the community who started either self-hosting Ente or maintaining one more replica of their own data with a self-hosted instance. So yeah, people in general, we encourage replicas as well. I mean, we ourselves keep 3 copies of your data, but if you want to keep one of your own, then by all means, you should be able to do it.
Nice, super nice. So Ente Photos is your first product, and I tested it out when it was earlier on, and I definitely need to do an update because I know you've rolled out so many new features and you've definitely just added a lot more to it. When I tested it out, I think AI Faces was in beta.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it still is.
It is still in beta, yeah.
Yeah, and one thing I did definitely instantly notice was that it was very Google Photos like. And so I can definitely see the inspiration there because it tried to do a lot of the things that Google Photos did. Where do you feel that Ente already matches or beats Google Photos? And again, we'll talk about like the safety and the privacy, which is kind of the whole selling point here. But just from a feature perspective, where do you feel like you're still trying to compete against Google Photos, and where are areas that you want to kind of see improve, and where do you feel like you're already killing it right now for people who haven't used Ente Photos to give them an idea of just what you're offering?
Understood. I think we're already killing it when it comes to reliability of the service, because a lot of work has actually gone behind the infrastructure, because half of the team is actually infrastructure engineers. So we have put a lot of effort into making sure that anything you upload is replicated across multiple instances, and one of these instances is in an underground fallout shelter. The other has a compliance lock, which means that we are immune to ransomware attacks. So the majority of the infrastructure is very high. That's one place where I think we're doing really good. And even in terms of accessibility, I think data portability is great with us. Like you can, our desktop app has a single button which will just export all of your data into your, like wherever you want to. We also have a CLI, so if you have your own VPS running somewhere, you can just run the CLI to incrementally pull all of your stuff out. So these are areas we do really well at. The areas still need we have a lot of catching up to do is just in terms of pure product, right? Like for example, the features that we spoke of in terms of search and discovery, and a lot of this is still in beta, but I can see the light at the end of the tunnel. So we will be shipping a lot of these features into production over the next couple of months. So which is why Photos has not hit V1 yet. It is still in V0.9 at this point. So when all of this gets out of beta is when we'll hit V1.
Yeah, do you mind actually speaking about some of the challenges you face? Because when you're Google and you host Google Photos, it's really easy to do AI processing on thousands of photos because they're able to view all the photos in the server and do the processing on the server. Whereas you don't have that luxury because you can't see people's photos. So you have to rely on the person's device to actually do all the processing. So how does that make development more challenging for you, do you feel?
Yeah, it's been incredibly hard, right? The thing is, one, there is no inspiration for us to draw from because there is nobody else doing whatever we're trying to do. And secondly, see, the good thing is a lot of great models are out there which are open. So for face recognition, for semantic search, all of these things are detecting face detection. All of these, the models are out there. The challenges are in actually integrating this because all of these models are created with the assumption that they'll be running on servers, and whereas we are running them on mobile devices or your laptops, wherein compute is a far more constrained resource. So we have to make sure that whatever we're doing is super optimal so that it actually runs on your mobile device. And like for example, with face recognition, right, there are multiple steps to the entire pipeline. Wherein first we run a model to detect the faces in a photo, and then we extract the embeddings out of it, and then we do the clustering. Now the clustering itself is extremely complicated, and there are on server side there are vector DBs which are available. We don't have vector DBs right now on mobile, so we have to hack around it. And there are parts wherein customers might give feedback: are these the same people, or is this a different person? And all of this clustering has to happen, the user feedback has to be taken in, and all of this information has to sync across your devices into an encrypted because you don't want to keep doing this on every device. So engineering all of this has actually been very difficult. And also on server side, you have a lot of these very mature libraries available, right? For example, Python, and like you can just import something and things will just work out of the box for you. Whereas we now have to rewrite a lot of those libraries and to get it to work on mobile and web. And yeah, it's been hard, but there is a lot of joy in doing hard things. So you should actually check out Photos right now. In the last release that we've done, people are actually very happy with how accurate face recognition is. And semantic search is the other thing we've been building, which is basically where you can search for things like a girl in a red dress playing with a dog at the beach, and it'll actually pull out really impressive results for you. And now the idea is to kind of tie in all of these modalities together so that we can actually push memories to you. And yeah, a lot of work pending, but yeah, we'll get there.
Right. And I guess when you're rewriting or optimizing, do you have to pretty much rewrite from scratch, or are you taking the code and then having to modify it in a way so that it's now compatible with something like a mobile device? What does that general process look like for you to kind of translate things?
Correct. So the models are usually convertible. Like right now, we've tried out multiple frameworks. We started off with I think TF Lite, and then PyTorch Mobile, and then GGML, and right now we're on ONNX. And the great thing about ONNX is that it's very portable as a format. So what we do is whatever, for example, if OpenAI has released a model called Clip, we can just convert that into ONNX very easily, and then we make that into a format that can actually run on the mobile. The harder challenge is when we talk about the other library functions that are there. For example, we have had to engineer a lot around face alignment, which is if there is a photo with my face tilted a bit to the right, then we kind of have to do some maths around it to tilt it back so that the embeddings will be similar to other photos of myself. And for this in Python, it's ridiculously easy because there are libraries available. And now here we kind of have to look at the Python library, understand what they're doing, and then do this in a separate language or languages. So those parts have been much harder.
Yeah, no, it seems like there's not as much work because all of the AI stuff is all being rushed out to servers and people who are hosting your data for you. And so I feel like there's a very limited selection of AI tools that are run locally on people's devices.
Right. But I am very optimistic about this because see, the more I think we've taken over 2 years to build this, right? And if you look at us as a team, we're a very small team and we actually ship very fast. And so right now we've actually built a lot of expertise, and we're optimistic that in the long run, models will continue to be open. They'll be smaller. Compute will keep getting better. So whatever bets we are placing in terms of running AI privately on device is the way forward. And I think whatever else is happening is absurd. So yeah, I think we are doing the right thing by betting on whatever it is that we're betting on.
Yeah, I guess on this note, this is really off topic, but I guess what are your general thoughts on this? And is this something that you could ever build? And it's the whole Apple Intelligence, their AI, how they're kind of they have servers that are able to process some things, but they're not able to see the data on those servers. Do you have any thoughts on that kind of model?
Yeah, so PCC or private cloud compute, right? I think what they're doing is interesting. The only missing piece is that it's not open source. So there is an elaborate trust me bro angle to it. And I think in the long run, we'll also have to get into that territory because there are certain models which are way too big to run on the client. Like I think segmentation models are one thing where I can just pick out something in the background, for example the keyboard there in the background, and move it or away or like rewrite it. So those are actually very heavy and we don't see them getting any smaller in the long run. And if customers really want it, the only way for us to do this would be to do what Apple is doing, which is but in an open source way, wherein the entire server side code will be open and it will be verifiable that it is the code that we're pushing out there, which is available there. And yeah, so it's actually interesting that Apple is doing this because there is a lot of inspiration we can draw from them in the long run.
Got it. That's really cool. And theoretically, I assume because you're going to have the code open, could someone have a local NAS here that hosts their Ente photos, and then they have a really powerful server, across the country that does kind of the AI processing for them? Or is this something that has to be done on specific hardware that's designed to run this code?
No, absolutely. Whenever we do things, we'll make sure that it supports self-hosting use cases as well. And in fact, even right now, we encourage folks to use the desktop app to perform a lot of indexing. So, see that if you're a new user, as the photos are getting uploaded on the mobile, they will do the indexing. Now, the problem is like, for example, I have 30,000 odd photos on Ente. Now, to let my Pixel 7 index all of those photos would be a crime. So what I do is I just index them on my laptop, and because it's far more powerful, and then the mobile device actually pulls the indexes and it's able to execute the search on top of them.
Got it. Really cool. I guess a couple more things on Ente photos before I ask about a few different products here. What's the process like for transferring photos? If someone's listening and let's say because now you have a free plan on Ente photos, so people can try it out. And let's say someone tries it out, they say, okay, I really like this, but I have 15 years of my life on Apple Photos or Google Photos. What's the general process like for a typical user to switch into Ente photos?
So Apple actually makes it much simpler. Like so within the device itself, whatever APIs they give you, we can actually pull photos from iCloud. So a lot of customers just leave the app open overnight and the library just moves. There are some quality issues wherein Apple might not give us the original photo you uploaded. That's kind of a bummer, but in most cases they do. I feel they respect portability a lot more than Google does. With Google, it's a massive pain because you have to go to Google Takeout and then download your data there, which is bundles and zips. It extracts all the metadata out into like separate JSON files and like separate files, and at times the JSON files are elsewhere and the files are elsewhere. So but we have a desktop app wherein you can just drag and drop the zip files. We'll do all the magic to kind of merge all of this metadata together and to give you back, or at least it's a best effort thing to kind of give you back whatever you initially gave Google. So the problem with Google Photos is the takeout part. Once you get your data out, then you can kind of rely on Ente to back it up.
That's good you do the automatic part of that, because I don't know, I think it's an interesting concept, and maybe back in the day it was really cool to be able to, when you do a Google Takeout, it opens an HTML web page and then you can kind of sort through all your data in a cool little web browser format. But I feel like that they haven't updated that process in a long time, and I feel like there's a lot of things they can do to make that a lot easier for people. But I know that Proton has a one-click Google transfer thing. Does that not work for photos?
No, it does not work for photos. So in fact, I feel this whole takeout thing is malicious compliance for GDPR because they actually have APIs for Google Photos as well, right? And if they would actually let developers use it, we could easily pull the data out and upload it. Now, in their terms of service for the Google Photos APIs, they explicitly forbid you from building a competing service to just pull the data out. They actually state this out that you can't be using this for data migrations. So it's... Wow. Yeah, I'm not sure if it is malice or it is stupidity. but it's not great. Like, what are they doing is not great.
Wow. No, I don't think a lot of people know about that. I didn't know about that either. That's really interesting. Do you have any integrations with operating systems that you either wish you could make or you want to make? Because I do think that even if you could match, like, like completely match what Google Photos offers, there are some, light integrations that Google Photos might have with the operating system. So is that something that you currently match or that you're currently thinking about? Because I know a lot of people like the integration that their photo library has with their devices.
Right, right. And a lot of these are very simple things. Like, for example, when you click a photo, there is usually an icon there to open the photo in the gallery app. And I'm not sure if it's because of EU, but I would like to believe it's because of EU that these folks are getting pressured into making these functionalities more accessible. At least Google has recently launched a cloud media provider app wherein you can set what a default app is and what a default cloud media provider is. But these are currently available as an invite only system to services the OEM suggest. So Samsung has to pitch Ente as a provider for this whole thing to work. So I don't know at what point it will become accessible to us. And the same thing is happening with Apple as well, right? At least now that they have, I haven't really looked into their APIs, but they supposedly you can uninstall Photos app and install something else. I don't have complete visibility into the documentation is like, but I feel in the long run it should be possible for us to be your default Photos app on your device.
Be super cool. Yeah, a lot of the stuff in the EU right now is really exciting to see how they're opening up the operating systems and allowing other people to actually implement their software if they want to do that. Are you following the EU situation? Are there any things in particular that you're excited about, worried about?
Most recently, it was a whole Telegram thing that I've been reading upon. I mean, right before this call, I was just checking out some blog posts and Hack News about it. And see, I don't think politicians anywhere care about privacy apart from their own privacy. So I think it's the people and it's a culture that's there in you, which is different perhaps in terms of how they value their own personal privacy. So I am at the same time grateful that they've kind of pushed things forward like GDPR and kind of mandating certain rights, at least for their own citizens. And then, of course, there is chat control and there's a lot of other stuff happening as well, which I believe as a democracy, these things will not pass. I'll be very surprised if they pass it. I'll be disappointed if they do. Uh, but yeah, my understanding of this is basically derived from somebody else's commentary on this. So I am not really an authoritative source to kind of talk about this.
Yeah, very valid. Um, I guess for people who uh, are there situations where you feel like end-to-end encryption might be hard for certain jurisdictions? Um, and how does that impact Ente in any way, do you feel?
I think it's possible for jurisdictions to just say this is not legal, right? Like I'm actually not sure if Ente works in Russia, or I know that it actually works in China because recently some customer wrote to us saying that all the other apps broke when they moved to China, and then but Ente was still working. And the idea for us is to actually listen to law and order. Like it's the idea is not that we are not above the law. Like if a certain jurisdiction wants us to not make itself available there, we'll do that because it's in the best interest of everybody else out there. So again, actually going back to what's happening with Telegram right now, right? I actually don't know why they chose not to encrypt data because that they could have always done that, and I also don't know why they did not have terms which kind of was stricter in terms of I know they're all pro speech. I'm also pro free. I mean free speech, but I feel some of those decisions are very different from how I would have gone about it, especially considering the team that they have. Like I don't know if you know the CTO of Telegram, Pavel's brother Nikolai. He's like a mathematical genius, and he's like won multiple Olympiads as a kid, and he's authored MT Proto and like the Ton paper. And so for somebody like that to pull off end-to-end encryption with the same user experience that they are providing right now would have actually been trivial, but they took a call not to do that. And now I use Telegram, right? And I use it not because of privacy. I think it's actually a great product and not just a great chat app. I actually think it's a great product. And now suddenly I'm like, oh, now the product might actually die. So for a durability perspective, or like just to from a customer satisfaction perspective, I think for certain companies, if the idea is to like be there for the long haul, it's you have to play nicer with the governments, right? And because it's actually interesting how Signal has done things differently, right? Now, at the same time, there is this post about how Meredith has gone to Paris and she's having a vacation in Paris, and at the same time, Duro was arrested in Paris, and they're doing kind of the same thing but in a slightly different way. And It's a weird situation to be in. Yeah, it's just random commentary that I'm passing.
No, I think it's really valuable though, and I think it's something that I'm seeing a lot in the communities and whatnot. Is Signal is just always end to end encrypted, so they're Signal can comply all they want, and they have to because they're a legal organization, or else they're just going to get shut down, which has happened with other privacy services that just simply don't comply with the government. So what do people want? Do they want a provider that's not going to comply at all, and then you just get shut down in 6 months, and in the process get multiple people arrested? Or are you going to have somebody who just builds a product from the ground up that can't hand over very much user data or any at all? And then, that's how they exist. And then now, from a legal perspective, it's not being able to nitpick where, they choose to hand over data versus not hand over data. It's simply that, okay, if we're going to stop this service from existing, we're either going to have to block them entirely, which is just outright censorship, or we have to ban the technologies they're utilizing. So I think that's where, I really agree with Signal's approach as well. I think what Telegram's been doing is shocking to me. I mean, I'm sure you've seen their transparency report where they say they've never handed over user data, even though we have dozens of stories now of Telegram handing over user data in different jurisdictions. So the way that Telegram conducted itself was just never. And again, I also agree, it's got some really nice features and it's not a bad product, but just the way they handled user safety and privacy and security. I mean, everyone in this space has been kind of like, yeah, we've been talking about this
Yeah,
for years
and the
now.
thing is,
Um,
it's so this is not the first time, right? I think we kind of went through this whole drama with Kim.com and Mega, and then finally Mega kind of rebranded to Mega, sorry, Mega Upload, and then they rebranded to Mega and added a layer of end-to-end encryption for plausible deniability, and we have seen this same story play out. So it's interesting that now we're kind of going in a loop.
yeah. So it's cool that you don't have a bizarre opt-in end-to-end encryption model where not everything's always encrypted, group chats aren't. So it's good that Ente's always just end-to-end encrypted. And I guess on that note, because a big criticism of Telegram is that they roll out their own crypto. What kind of crypto you guys use in Ente?
We've not invented our own crypto at all. So we do something which is very similar to what password managers do. I think what Bitwarden I think uses the same libraries. I'm not very sure. There is a library called Lipsodium which actually exposes really high level abstractions that you can build on top of, and which is what we've actually built on top of, and we've had it externally audited as well by Q53 and Nadeem Kobayashi. So yeah, we're just reusing high level abstractions which are like tested and like fundamentally safe to use instead of doing anything custom of that sort.
Got it. No, that's something that I very much appreciate. And I think a lot of people do. There definitely are times where it makes sense to roll your own crypto, but it's always just nice to have something that's more industry established. What is your core demographic? And the reason I ask this is I saw the Linus Tech Tips de-Googling video that they did, which mentioned Ente as a good alternative to Google Photos. There are so many communities that I feel like can get value out of something like Ente Photos. And obviously there's kind of historically more of our community, which is very privacy and security focused, people who just don't want companies to have access to their data. But clearly there's this big push and there's this massive de-Googling community of people who just don't like Google for whatever reason. But then there's also just so many other demographics out in the internet that I feel like would appreciate something like this, including open source people or people who just want to be able to use software that's available on all of their devices and not just be limited to one phone. So you can say all, but do you have kind of some core people that you're really targeting with Ente Photos?
Hmm. Not really, to be honest. We're kind of throwing a lot of darts and seeing what sticks. Not very disciplined in terms of marketing because the team is very engineering heavy. Uh, and it's just that we do some things and they accidentally seem to work, and then we're kind of happy about it. And just growing organically by word of mouth. The initial plan was just to stick to Reddit and privacy related communities, and we did not get as much traction as we thought we would there. So then we just kept building, and I think now is when people are kind of warming up to us in some sense, and which is also fair, I feel, because like coming back, right? I think especially with a product like photos, it's important to know that this is not a company that will just go away. And for us also, this is a very long game, right? For me, personal motivation is to make sure that my kid gets the photos that I've clicked through Ente, and that's the kind of legacy that I would want to leave behind for her. So I can understand the skepticism purely from a longevity standpoint, right? So you were not in a hurry to like get like a million free users or anything. So we've been building things slowly, sustainably, which is why we did not have a free plan, right, for the longest time. While we knew that this is like the easiest way to kind of attract customers, but we just took the call that we're not at a place where we can do that financially, so let's not do it. So we've like built for like 3 years without doing it, and now it makes sense to do it financially. So now we're doing it. So it's a slow growth product, and we feel this is the kind of company that we want to build, especially given the kind of data that we're asking out of customers.
Right, and I think I have seen that concern. It's a concern of mine as well, actually, because I don't want to move my photos into something that will shut down, but I have this concern with everything. So, throw it back to Skiff, throw it back to many other services that, made big names and then kind of just disappeared. What are kind of so, I guess, are you VC funded? If so, how do you feel like that influences things? If not, why do you choose to go that route? And then also, worst case scenario, let's say something happens to Ente, how can you reassure users that they can easily export their data?
Got it. So, no, we're not VC funded. And I don't really have anything against VC funding as such, because I think a lot of companies actually require it even just to go from 0 to 1. Like companies like OpenAI wouldn't exist had it not been for VC funding. And for certain other companies, it's not necessary at all. Like if you were building a B2B SaaS, I think a single customer could just help me break even. And certain other companies like use it for acceleration. Like I think Bitwarden has recently done that a couple of years back. They finally raised some like massive amount of capital when at a point where they perhaps do not really need it. So there are multiple ways to play the game. I think for us, it's just been that we have not been able to find investors who are very aligned with the way we want to do this. And so because even so there's actually this really nice book called Secrets of the Sandhill Road, wherein they talk about what the investors' motivations are for why they invest in a company, and their expectations that come along with capital. It could be returned, like I think the default is around 100x, and then they have time frames for it as well, because they are answerable to their LPs, and they have a fund cycle to deal with. And yeah, just alignment in general. I think for us, we've not really found anyone who kind of ticks a lot of these boxes. And there are other companies, right? I think SimpleX Chat recently raised like a 1.3 million round, and Proton has raised like a 2 million round initially on their early days. So I don't think there's a specific way to play the game. For us, we did take some money from friends and family who just like wanted to be part of the journey. But the majority of the company is still like with the team, and it's yeah. And I don't think we'll need VC money in the long run. I don't think we'll have to pitch to investors. At least that's what I think. The way we're growing, I think we'll reach sustainability. And yeah, okay, coming to the second part of the question, right, which is about what happens if Ente shuts down. So some of the steps we've taken have just been to answer those questions starting from day one, right? Like our MVP had that desktop export wherein you could get incremental exports by just clicking a single button. And because we actually care about it, because I feel as a user, I wouldn't install a service if I did not know that I could actually pull my data in one click. Then I invested in a CLI. I think we're the only Photos app which actually gives you a command line interface to access your data. And the whole decision to open source a server as well was to make sure that, let's say, God forbid, like all of us is die or something, the project is still there and either someone can choose to run it. Because unlike a lot of other self-hosted instances, since Ente is end-to-end encrypted, you can actually just anyone can spin it up and people can like start putting their photos there, right? So major reason for open sourcing our server as well was to make sure that the project will kind of just live on like beyond us.
Right, super cool. And it's one of the big perks of open source software in general. What would you tell somebody who's using iCloud Photos with advanced data protection? Because now you can do end-to-end encrypted with iCloud Photos, and it still keeps pretty much all the same features, if not all of them, like AI searching and whatnot within iCloud Photos. What are the selling points still to Ente Photos for a person who's using iCloud Photos in that situation?
For one, I was under the assumption that ML would not work if advanced data protection was turned on. But maybe I'm wrong, right? I'm not very sure about this. I'll have to double check. Sharing is fundamentally broken in Apple, like even within the ecosystem, how you might actually go about sharing, and especially God forbid the other person is on a different device, which is not within the Apple ecosystem, you're screwed, right? So accessibility is a major plus for Ente, and open source if you care about it, right? And like the whole de-Google moment, I think there is also this anti-centralization movement which is happening. Like it's just about anti-big tech, right? You don't want to support big tech with anything. I think these are use cases, but in general, if you're married to the Apple ecosystem and you're kind of happy with where you are, I think then that's fine. Like I don't think Ente has to fit into every user's use case. If you're kind of happy with where you are and you're getting the level of privacy that you want out of that system, then that's totally cool.
Yeah, I think also the big thing is iCloud Photos, especially with ADP, is fantastic with Apple devices. With Apple devices, but then you wanna get an Android device or you want to run Linux on a different device. Then what? They do kind of work around this. You can toggle advanced data protection in your iCloud settings to work on the web. And then they have this really clever end-to-end encryption thing where in real time you share the encryption key with a new device in the web. So you can do things on the web there. But then you still can't actually realistically really use this as a daily driver on anything outside an Apple device. So I think that, it's even if it works well on Apple devices, that's the only thing it's ever going to work well on. And I think that's where like having these services that are cross-platform is really solid. And I really enjoy. I tried to find a platform that you weren't on, and it was really hard to do. You're on F-Droid, you're on the Play Store, you're on the iOS App Store, you're on desktop for all three major operating systems. Do you have a Flatpak on Linux?
No, we don't have a Flatpak on Linux.
Okay, so that's like maybe one thing that I think the community might get nitpicky over is they might want a Flatpak, but outside that, I mean, it's very accessible in pretty much every OS, which is really solid. So people can always mix and match whatever they want to use, and they don't have to change their photo provider just because they buy a new phone, which is really appreciated. Is there a reason to Flatpak, just out of curiosity?
Just engineering bandwidth, like very small team, so it's very important for us to prioritize ruthlessly and to execute very efficiently. So yeah.
Yeah. So how do you currently do Linux? Do you do like a .deb?
No, we have an app image and we have a .deb as well.
App image.
Yeah.
Okay, got it. That's all I have about Ente Photos. Ente Auth. I use Ente Auth. I used to use so many different authentication providers over the years. But eventually I landed on Ente Auth because it's really the only real cross-platform end-to-end encrypted provider at this point. And I always like to pick, kind of like I was saying with the photos thing previously, I always like to pick things that in general are going to open me up to devices down the road. I don't want to feel like I'm locked into a specific OS and that I can't move to something else down the road. And so Ente right now is really the only real cross-platform option. Even though there's wonderful options on both iOS and Android, I haven't found anything that syncs between them. So, but I had questions about it because it's free. There's no business model whatsoever. So why Ente Auth was my first question.
So, I mean, the background to Ente Auth is actually interesting. So it's just that Neeraj over a weekend, so he had been complaining about not having a cross-platform app for a long time, which is open source. And he knew that we already had the entire infrastructure to just persist and sync any data which is end-to-end encrypted. So over a weekend, he just hacked up something which would just back up the secrets and put it on a different device. And all of us felt it was cool and that we should just ship it to the community and see what it feels like, and see if they like it. And so we just polished whatever Neeraj had built in terms of UX, and we put it out there. And initially we were not sure how to so we just said that we don't know if this will be free forever. It's just a hobby project of sorts, and put it out there, and the community absolutely loved it. So then we realized that, okay, this is interesting. So it just continued to be a weekend project for the longest time. And then interestingly enough, we realized that, hey, there are a lot of users on Ente Auth who end up discovering photos because they use Auth, and these are folks who are at least conscious about the security, and privacy is questionable, but definitely they care about the security. So we realized that these are folks who are actually discovering photos simply because we had a hyperlink on the sidebar somewhere, like if you open the sidebar. And so this is what actually ties back into how I was talking about how we are not very effective at marketing. These are all accidental discoveries. And so since then, it's actually given us a really nice stream of users who would have otherwise perhaps not discovered photos. So we just continued investing in it. And also there is this fundamental philosophy that if we push something out there, we should meet customer expectations out of it. We don't want to do a half-assed job at anything, right? So yes, so we just continued maintaining it with a lot of help from community.
Right, really cool. And I'm glad you did it because no one's done it. And it doesn't seem hard to me. I'm not a developer
Yeah,
nor an
absolutely. See,
engineer,
compared to
but
photos, right?
it's a
Yeah,
string of text. It's literally a string of text.
right.
And I just don't see why there isn't already an option out there. And it's kind of crazy to me. So I'm really glad that you all did that. And it makes sense too how it's just natural, you like Ente Auth, and then, oh, by the way, we also have Ente Photos, and it's a really nice little stream of users there for people who might want to use it for different reasons. I didn't think about that because I have the inverse relationship in that I, learned about Ente Photos first, and I was already familiar, and then I saw you all released Auth, and I go, oh, that's very different, but that's actually pretty welcome. And now I think it's on our resources now because there's really no other.
Yeah, I saw it on Plexus as well recently. Like, yeah, it's there as well.
Nice. Okay, I'm glad people rated it on Plexus. People who are listening, we have a project. It's open source here on Techlore. It allows you to rate how well things work on de-Googled operating systems on Android. So contribute data. It's free. It's easy. Just download the app. And if you have any app on your phone, it'll help someone else decide whether or not they can use a custom operating system. So I'm glad someone rated Auth. It was not me. So I saw on your website, so you have Ente Photos, Ente Auth, and Ente Legacy.
Mm-hmm.
What's that?
So Legacy is this project we've been pushing for quite some time because of lack of bandwidth, but it's basically a way of saying that, hey, dude, when I'm not around anymore, my wife should get access to these folders, my daughter should get access to these folders. And the initial idea was to actually build an ecosystem, not just photos, to also have some amount of documents. Not really a drive app, but maybe like, whatever my insurance receipts are, or there are specific documents that I might just want my wife to get. So Legacy is the product that will kind of tie in all of this together so that they get access to whatever they're supposed to get access to when I'm not around anymore.
Got it. So you're not building, at least right now, any kind of dedicated drive solution, but what you're building is essentially this box that you can put things in, including documents, that is specifically designed for the purpose of if someone passes away, they want to pass on data to someone else. And do you do that by having, so I know in Google, for example, you can have it so after 9 months without activity, the account shuts down, or one of these things. Is it kind of that kind of situation where you set it up in advance and you give someone the email and then, so it's like a dead man switch type of deal?
Yeah, it's actually, I'm not sure if you've checked out Bitwarden's emergency contacts. We have taken a lot of inspiration from them for designing the API. So the APIs are ready. We never really built the front end for it. So it's basically that within 1 month, if so my wife can actually request for access to my account, and if I don't respond within a month, she'll be able to get access, and all of this information will transfer into and encrypted to her account.
Yeah, it's crazy. Are there any mainstream solutions to this? Because I feel like this is something that most people don't think about.
Yeah. There are actually, interestingly, a lot of VC funded companies that do just this, right? And have raised like millions of dollars, and it's a game on its own. And they're mostly catering to, I think, really high net worth folks. So and these pieces of software are ridiculously expensive as well. So they'll kind of give you a customer support agent as well, so that they'll kind of walk you through the whole thing. Nothing is encrypted. So just the idea is that they'll kind of just make sure that the transition is smooth.
Right. I'm kind of surprised this isn't something I've really heard many people talk about in my life nor online. I just don't see many people talk about, the unfortunate situations if something's to happen to somebody and how they get that data reliably to someone else, because you don't want, especially in the security community where a lot of the people in the community probably actively make sure that no one can get into their stuff. There needs to be some kind of backdoor in your stuff for the people that you do trust in the event that something happens to you, at least for data that they're going to need or want. So I think it's a really good way to have like something built in like that. And I think what Bitwarden has done is really solid for that. I don't think Proton's done that with Proton Pass yet, to my knowledge. But it's something that I wish more services provided. So I think it's really cool. And once that's done, I'm definitely going to check that out, because frankly, I don't have a great solution yet from my end either. So it's something I need to explore. What's something that a lot of people want you all to do at Ente that you either might do or maybe you don't want to. But if you don't want to, is there a good reason for it? And you're like, hey, we actually can't do this. Like, what's something you just wish you could tell more people in the community? Like, hey, we hear you, but here's our formal response to it.
Right. So I think a lot of folks want us to build a Drive app because they feel in general we do a good job of the UX, and the level of polish that we give is something that people are happy with. And it is true that fundamentally in terms of architecture, right, we've got albums and photos, and it just folders and files instead. So it's not any different in terms of what the storage model is like. It's just a presentation layer that's different. And this is something we just keep pushing. And I think at this point we've been very upfront that, hey guys, we're not gonna start any new threads until the photos product has reached a level of polish that or level of maturity that we want it to. Because it's very easy to ship the fast version of any product, like even with Auth, right? And since then we have also learned the hard way that we wanna maintain those projects as well, because if we are sticking Ente's brand onto a specific product, then we want it to stand for certain level of quality or like certain level of excellence, and that's hard to maintain with the small team that we have. So the idea right now is to just do one thing, which is photos, and do it as well as possible to execute really well. And at some point, right, who knows, like I think there'll be some point wherein we'll feel that okay, either we have extra bandwidth or the product is reached level of maturity wherein we can explore other like products. But yeah, so Drive is one thing, right, wherein community really wants it, and we are very upfront about the fact that not something we really want to look into right now.
Right. Are there any products that you're comfortable sharing, obviously in the public, that you want to maybe tackle down the road, or are the only confirmed things right now legacy?
Nothing really, because see, the scope with photos is really broad, right? See, now we're talking about search, and once we tackle search, this is the other thing about videos, right? We want videos are still not a first class citizen on Ente, because the entire, like, if it's a 4 GB file, we have to download the whole thing. There is no streaming, there is no end-to-end encrypted streaming. And so right now we started work on end-to-end encrypted streaming, and it's a massive project on its own. And we know what to do. It's just that it's gonna take a lot of work, a lot of lines of code to get us to where we want to. And so that videos are one side, one part of the things. And after we have search is when we would actually like to enable discovery, so that you don't have to go and explicitly search for things, because see, there's a lot of joy and nostalgia that comes with photos, right? A lot of value we can provide is not with backups, because backups is just table stakes for Ente in the long term. The idea is to actually give you a lot more joy out of whatever you've clicked in the past. So there is tons of work to create an engine that can go through and push you the best photos possible in that moment, that will kind of make you feel good about yourself or like whatever your life is, and to do all of this in a privacy friendly way. So there's a lot of work that's to be done there. And then there is the other part about photos is just sharing, right? And I don't see any photos app or any app that actually solves photo sharing really well. Like either we come to Signal or there are WhatsApp groups with families, and it's the sharing is a broken experience, right? You don't really, like, it's a transient chat, the photo goes away and you can't really have a conversation around a photo. And Instagram was supposed to be that app that would enable photo sharing, but it's kind of gone down a very different direction. And like, there is no way I'm putting my kid's photo on Insta, right? So it's yeah, so there's a clear gap there, and that'll require, I don't know, maybe hundreds of iterations for us to get to a place wherein we have something which is clean and which is uh, private but social. And yeah, so the scope with photos is really large, and there is so much to think about that we've actually not gone outside the scope of photos and really thought about things. We know there are a lot of things we can do, but again, that fundamental philosophy of doing one thing and doing it really well.
Got it. Yeah, no, it's not a bad philosophy to have, and it's something I really appreciate. It's just good to see that, because not everyone has that same philosophy, and I think it's frustrating too. I think that you'd probably be hearing a lot more from the people who want Drive if you just rushed out Drive and it
Yeah,
wasn't
right.
what they
Polish. Yeah,
wanted.
right. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think it's definitely a good approach to have. Is there anything else that you kind of want to finish out with? Any final words on your end? That's all I have on my end, so I kind of leave it in your
Ah,
court if there's anything you
okay.
want to tell the audience.
Nothing really. I mean, in general, see, I do lurk on forums quite a bit, and so there are two angles to Ente as a product, right? One is that it's privacy focused, and then a lot of those forums are toxic for their own reasons, and then there's open source, right? So GitHub is toxic for a very different set of reasons. And interestingly, I find the Techlore community to be, I mean, wholesome is a very strong word, but I think it is wholesome in its own way.
Yeah, no, that's really good to hear. Thank you. It takes a lot of work, and one the goal of the community was to build a community that I didn't feel like existed in the community yet. So it's nice to hear that from you. And if you have any advice or feedback or things that we can change or improve, just let me know, because I'm sure that it would probably be for the better if we could do that. But I really appreciate having you on, Vishnu. If people have any comments, definitely on our forum, leave them. Or if you're on YouTube, leave them as well. And I'm sure there are things that I don't know if you have an active account or anything on any of these, but I'd love to try to open up the conversation if anyone wanted to ask you more questions that I didn't touch on today. So
Yeah, I do lurk on Techlore forums, right? So if anyone has any questions, you guys can tag me there, or I'm very active on Discord, because Discord is where our entire work happens. So you guys can come over and check us out on Discord as well.
cool. Yeah, I know. I've seen you mention your Discord on some of your socials. So definitely multiple areas where people can all check you out. And then where can people reach you personally, or where can they reach Ente if they want to learn more?
You can write to me at vishnu@ente.io, or just check us out at ente.io.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you, Vishnu, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you so much, Henry. It was fun.